If we, League players, have one thing in common and one thing only, I would say it's probably the fact that we really love to complain about game balance. That's exactly what I'm planning to do with you today, so let's get going. When it comes to Mel, it is certainly not too far-fetched to say her initial win rate has been nothing short of crazy. People are just losing their minds over her abilities and such, especially the Uno reverse card she has baked into her kit. That's quite a valid reason for all the outrage if you ask me, by the way. However, I sincerely believe League's problem is deeper than a single new champion, even if it's as broken as Mel. In the next few minutes, I'll try to explain why I think that and how League got to this point in the first place. Before we get into big picture stuff, I really want to reiterate. Seeing Mel have like a 52% win rate right after release was mental. But what's even more senseless is how she sank all the way down to 48% after the nerfs on the same patch. That just goes to show there is something deeply wrong here. Nowadays, I feel like the reaction of the community for every new champion is extremely negative, which is such a big shame. Because I do, in fact, remember the good old days of champion releases, and I'm pretty sure many of you do as well. For example, remember Jhin? Everyone was so incredibly excited for his rollout. I'm telling you, you just had to be there. Jhin's release almost satisfied everyone in the player base, which is quite hard to do, as we all know. Whether if you were a lore enjoyer or just someone who liked the idea of playing with a unique champ in every sense of the word, Jhin was the pick for you. A lot has changed since then. I really mean that. A lot has changed. New champion releases aren't things people look forward to anymore, at least not as much as they dread them. Back in 2016, 17, 18, whatever you wanna call it, a new champion being released was this hype occasion with leaks, rumors, people going insane with their theories, along with being super hyped up to actually play the champs when they eventually release. It was just a different time. Now, once I see something about a new champion on my Twitter feed, I'm like, oh my, this champion is surely going to be so indescribably broken when it comes out. Another permaban until it gets quote-unquote fixed somehow. I think you get where I'm coming from. I'm just not happy with the direction of the new champion releases, and I know I'm speaking for almost everyone here. You do agree with me, right? Jokes aside, maybe you don't 100% agree with me on every specific little thing, but I'm pretty sure everyone in the community has some sort of a baseline understanding that the new champions are a different breed than the rest, let's just say. One thing is for sure though, Riot isn't necessarily doing a great job at taking all of these waves of criticism from the player base. This goes both ways, as in when it comes to actually implementing changes and just their overall attitude. We sometimes see really harsh replies by Rioters to the community. It's crazy. It's kind of funny how that infamous 200 years meme was born from just a Rioter disagreeing with a Wukong main, saying that their 200 years of collective game design experience is simply superior. So yeah, it's interesting, not in a good way I suppose. Anyway, here's what I'm thinking. If we really go into the root cause of the newer champions being extremely broken in one way or another, it is mostly because the new champions need to be interesting. That's it. I know that may not sound like a problem inherently, but we have to consider League at this point has 170 champions. That is beyond crazy when you take a moment to think about it. Let's assume there are 4 abilities for each champion for simplicity's sake, and do you know what we get even if we do that? We get 680 different abilities League players must learn and be aware of. Yeah, it definitely takes a bit of time to get used to, but when you do, the hardest thing in the world now is to excite you with new mechanics while making sure those said new mechanics aren't completely absurd. We all collectively need to understand. From Riot's perspective, releasing a new champion means so much time and resources dedicated to them, so of course, they want them to be flashy. This usually causes the newer champions to have very unique gimmicks like Silas Ultimate Steal, Viego Reset, so on and so forth. All of those are mechanics that are completely new and game-breaking, not in a good way. Let me be super clear, I think those champions turned out to be great additions to League in the grander scheme of things. We gotta give Riot some credit where it's due. Even though those champions had a rough start, they actually managed to balance them without it being way too late, I guess. I don't know, cause the bugs, the outrage, the whole saga with Viego was kinda painful, but we all somehow made it past those dark times I suppose, so that's alright. We don't get lucky like that every single time though. It's a long list, but Zoe, Renata Glask, the Skarner rework, Phelios all come to mind immediately when I think about the most painful experience experiences I personally had with new champions. I wanna remind you and myself because I struggle to believe it sometimes, but we still have champs like Blitzcrank who quite literally slows himself after a small movement speed boost. Like, I don't know if I should laugh or feel sorry for him and the players who play him. I wish you the best, what can I say? The fact that we have Blitzcrank and his design in the same game with the newer generation of champions that usually introduce a new mechanic with their arrival is surreal. Once again, not in a good way. When that is the case, of course, Mel reflecting abilities, Yuumi literally being untargetable, K'Sante having 3000 dashes and his incredible tankiness alongside it, all of these things are going to feel hopelessly broken. Have you ever heard the term release date difference? Yeah, it's kinda rough. Some of the newer champions worked and are fitting the meta perfectly. However, you cannot balance every single one of them when they all have different gimmicks. For every Sylas or Huey, we have many Yuumis, K'Santes, like champions who seem to be destined for being broken. Either too strong or completely useless. That is exactly what I mean by being broken, by the way. Not just simply too strong, but having a kit that almost blocks them from being balanced, if that makes any sense. Let's be honest with ourselves, okay? Every so-called broken new champion pretty much follows the same cycle over and over again. They come out in a bit too good of a shape, but players are not the best at it, so they get buffed a little. So because of that, they become monstrous and way too strong. As a result, we see that said champion take over pro play very quickly, so Riot has to kind of over-nerf them. The next part to this whole journey is the most crucial. If the champion we are talking about survived the stage of being overly nerfed in terms of popularity, they have a very high chance of getting a few buffs back down the line and find their place in the meta. This is the ideal scenario, by the way. Of course, it doesn't happen every single time. For instance, Mel did the opposite of everything I just said. She came out way too strong with a game-changing gimmick right away, and Riot had to hotfix her almost immediately. Like, that makes me scared for the future. In my not so humble opinion, the biggest two problems for newer champs are these. Firstly, Riot is running out of ideas. They are creating too convoluted and gimmicky new mechanics for new champions, making them inherently hard to balance. Not impossible, but quite hard nevertheless. And the second reason is, Riot has to balance these new gimmicks in a way that doesn't disrupt both pro play and solo queue. Safe to say, finding a perfect balance between the two is very challenging. Solo queue is chaotic in its nature, and some champions' kits can't even be fully utilized in it. When it comes to pro play though, you just cannot have an Elder Dragon execute on a champion, particularly if the stacks needed for the execute can be reached quite early by just farming perfectly, because pro players will do just that and take over. It's been quite a bit of time with me and you just thinking out loud, trying to make sense why almost everybody hates to play against newer champions, and I think I made a few good points so far, no? That's good and all, still, the real challenge is coming up with a solution for this mess. Am I saying Riot shouldn't ever make new champions? Well, of course not. At the same time, I think if they continue the way they are doing right now, they will introduce further balancing problems which will never be fixed. At least as long as 10-year-old champions and champions like Mel, Smolder, and many others are in the same game. At the end of the day, Mel's launch was a complete hot mess, and I'm not surprised, not even a tiny bit. You know what, let me make a wild guess. With the current trajectory of things, the next few new champs are going to be even more broken. You and me, we will be back here discussing that too, so try not to get overly tilted by all the shenanigans until then. If you made it this far, that means the world to me, and I'm really curious to know what you think regarding everything I talked about today. Please do feel free to share your thoughts down in the comments. As usual, I will reply to every one of those. Thanks for watching, and last but definitely not least, take care of yourself until the next time. Bye bye.
Victory!